I'm Katherine Sanders. I turned 32 last spring, and for most of my life, I've known exactly where I stood in my family behind my sister. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, was the golden child. She got the smiles, the praise, the second helpings in the better room. She did everything right, at least according to our parents. She married at 24, had 2 boys, by 27 baked casseroles from scratch, and sent out Christmas cards in September. And me, I stayed single. Focused on my career, rented a quiet apartment across town where no one asked why I still hadn't settled down. I had a 401k, a Roth IRA, and no intention of asking anyone for help. Apparently, those things don't count when you're not wearing a ring. My parents, Linda and Jerry, never said it outright, but their questions always carried a weight. Don't you want children before it's too late? Your sister's boys are growing so fast. It's a shame they don't have cousins. You're still in that apartment, huh? I learned to nod and change the subject. I used to think if I worked hard enough, maybe they'd finally see me the way they saw Rachel. But the truth settled in slow like dust you stop noticing on the shelves. I wasn't the daughter they bragged about. I was the one they assumed would be fine no matter what. Still, I never complained. I visited on holidays, helped fix the Wi-Fi, brought wine when they forgot birthdays, mine included. And for the most part, I kept my distance. It felt safer that way. I didn't know back then that distance wouldn't be enough, that one day they'd try to pull me in so tightly I'd barely recognize myself. Rachel's picture-perfect life began to come apart the way fine china does, quietly at first, then all at once. Her husband David had been cheating for years. She found the messages by accident. Or maybe she was finally ready to stop pretending she didn't see what was already there. When she filed for divorce, no one blamed her, not even our parents. David disappeared shortly after, no child support, no apology, just gone. Rachel was left with 2 boys, Ethan and Jamie, and a stack of bills she couldn't carry alone. Our parents were supportive in words, but their savings were tied up in retirement and sentiment. Rachel moved into a 2-bedroom apartment where the boys shared a room and the wallpaper peeled in the corners. I didn't think twice. I paid her attorney's retainer. I covered 6 months of rent when her part-time hours at the community center weren't enough. I even watched the kids a few weekends so she could breathe. I never brought it up, never expected anything back. I loved my nephews. And Rachel, for all her past glory, looked broken, like someone who wasn't used to asking for help and hated needing it. Still, I thought maybe now our parents would see the truth. Maybe this time they'd understand I wasn't the one with something to prove. They didn't. Instead, every conversation with Mom began with an update on Rachel's pain, followed by a question about whether I was seeing anyone yet. I kept quiet, helped where I could, told myself family meant showing up even when you were tired of being invisible. But the thing about always being the responsible one is eventually people start assuming your help isn't a gift, it's a given. It was a Wednesday when my mother called. "Katherine, honey, we have such good news. Can you come by tonight?" Her voice had a brightness I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. I thought for a second that David had resurfaced, that the courts had finally found him, or that Rachel's life had turned a corner. "Is it about the boys or the child support?" I asked. No. Even better, she said. "Just come over. Your father's already home and Rachel will be here too." I drove across town after work, tired but curious. There was something off about her tone too, rehearsed, too smooth, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe for once it really was good news. When I walked into the living room, they were already seated, Dad on the recliner, Mom perched on the edge of the couch, Rachel beside her smiling nervously. On the coffee table sat a manila folder. "There she is," Dad said, standing to hug me, then handing me the folder. "Take a look." Inside was a stack of documents heavy with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, mortgage agreement. "What is this?" I asked. "It's for Rachel's new house," Mom beamed. "We used most of our savings and some of the retirement for the down payment. Isn't it wonderful?" I blinked. "You bought a house?" "Yes," she said. "A lovely place, 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys. They need stability. This apartment just isn't enough." I looked at Rachel, who gave a small nod but said nothing. "That's great," I said honestly. The boys will love that. I started to hand the folder back. No, those are for you, Mom said, pushing it toward me again. What do you mean for me? Dad cleared his throat. We've talked about this as a family and we've decided you'll take over the mortgage. You've been saving for years. You can make the payments easily. Rachel can't afford it, Mom added gently. She's doing everything she can, but the boys need this. The room went silent. I felt every eye on me. You're asking me to pay for Rachel's house, I asked. Rachel still wouldn't meet my eyes. After David left, I have nothing, she murmured. I can't give them what they need without help. I looked at the mortgage again. The amount was staggering. I already paid for her divorce, I said quietly. And half a year of rent. I've been saving for 10 years for my own home, sweetheart, Mom said, reaching for my hand. We raised you. We've done so much. Isn't it time to give back? I stood up, heart pounding. You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I'd cover it. Dad didn't deny it. You don't have a husband or children, he said flatly. I'm not doing this, I said. This isn't help. This is manipulation. I left the folder on the table unopened, and I walked out before I could start screaming. I thought they'd cool down. I told myself they'd realize how absurd it all was, that asking your unmarried daughter to pay for her sister's house wasn't something most people would defend. I was wrong. The first call came that Saturday from my cousin Tiffany, someone I hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. April told me what happened, she said. No hello, no pause. I can't believe you're being so cold. Excuse me? I asked. Rachel's a single mom, Katherine. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on all that money and won't help. I gripped the counter. Tiffany, you don't know the full story. I know enough. Family helps family. Before I could respond, she added, Rachel would do the same for you. I almost laughed, bitter, involuntary. No, she wouldn't, I said quietly. You're unbelievable, she snapped and hung up. The texts started after that. Then voicemails. People I barely knew, Uncle Don, Jessica, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, piling on. The messages blurred together. You're selfish. They raised you. She has children. You don't. What struck me most wasn't the anger. It was the certainty, as if they knew beyond doubt that I was wrong, that because I hadn't built a family of my own, I was now fair game to fund someone else's. The worst came from Aunt Pat, my mom's older sister. She called during dinner. I just want to talk some sense into you, she said in that sugary tone she'd perfected. You're not getting younger, Katherine. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way you'd be contributing to your family's future. So because I'm single, I said I owe Rachel a house. Don't be dramatic. They need help. And you, well, you're in a position to give it. That night, I blocked every number that had chimed in. One by one. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve my peace. And deep down, I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about the house. It never was. 2 months passed. I didn't hear from my parents, Rachel, or anyone else I hadn't already blocked. I poured myself into work, walked in the mornings, let silence become something close to peace. Then the envelope arrived. It came on a Thursday, thick, official looking. I thought it was insurance paperwork at first, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were suing me. Linda and Jerry Sanders. My parents had filed a formal civil claim. They were demanding $350,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to Katherine Sanders' upbringing. I read it twice, 3 times. Each line was colder than the last. They listed food, clothing, education. They included a section titled Emotional Support During Adolescence, which I couldn't read without laughing. They even tried to count vacations from when I was 6. And at the end, in plain language funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the Sanders property purchased for Rachel Sanders and her minor children. They weren't subtle. They didn't even pretend it was about principle. I called the best lawyer I could find. Jennifer Madsen met with me the next day. She wore glasses, spoke like she'd seen worse, and didn't blink once while I explained everything. They have no legal right to your money, she said flatly, flipping through the packet. Parents are obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no legal expectation of repayment. So why sue me, I asked. Jennifer shrugged. Pressure tactic. They think you'll give in to avoid court, or they genuinely believe you owe them. I felt numb, then angry, then ashamed for feeling either. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything. Proof of the $7,200 I'd paid for Rachel's rent, the $5,500 check to her divorce attorney, bank transfers to my parents over the years, $500 here, $1,000 there. Texts from my mother asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. I found receipts I didn't remember keeping. Pulled records from old email accounts. Every line was a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. When the court date came, I wore gray slacks and a blouse my grandmother had given me years ago. I brought only what I needed, and Walter and Maggie, who showed up in quiet defiance of their own daughter. Grandma squeezed my hand. "What they're doing isn't right," she whispered. "But you already know that." Across the aisle, my parents sat with Rachel beside them. She looked anywhere but at me. I told myself to breathe, not to hope. This wasn't about changing their minds. It was about proving mine still mattered. The courtroom was colder than it should have been in the middle of summer. The walls were beige, the carpet thin. I remember wondering who had picked the chairs hard plastic unyielding like they were built to punish waiting. My parents sat on the left, Rachel between them. Aunts and uncles behind people who hadn't sent me a birthday card in years now here to support the family. On my side sat just two Grandpa Walt and Grandma Maggie. She wore a brooch I hadn't seen since I was a child. When she leaned over to squeeze my hand, I almost broke. Then the judge walked in. He looked to be in his 60s, gray at the temples, glasses low on his nose. The kind of man who didn't rush to speak because he'd already heard every kind of lie. My father stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "we're not unreasonable people, but we invested our lives, our money, our time into raising Katherine. We're only asking for a portion of that back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge didn't blink. Specifically, he said, flipping a page, "What did you spend on her education after she turned 18? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Rachel had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established. So, the judge clarified, you did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses." "No," Mom said quickly. "But my mother, Katherine's grandmother, did. And since she's my mother, I'd argue we supported her indirectly." From behind me, Grandma let out the faintest scoff. Jennifer rose. Calm. Methodical. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Sanders has been financially independent since the age of 18. In addition, she has provided repeated financial support to both her parents and a sister." She handed over the file bank transfers receipts emails. This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 to her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during times they reported financial hardship. The judge reviewed quietly, then looked up. "So the defendant wasn't receiving support but giving it correct," Jennifer said. My mother shifted in her seat. "That money isn't relevant," she argued. "We're talking about the cost of raising her food shelter, emotional guidance." "Why exactly," the judge asked, "do you need $350,000 now?" Mom hesitated, looked at Rachel. "To help Rachel pay off the mortgage," she said softly. Silence. Even Uncle Don shifted uncomfortably behind her. The judge turned to Rachel. "Ms. Sanders, do you believe your sister should be responsible for your home loan?" Rachel finally looked up. "She's not married. She doesn't have children." "I do." "And that creates a financial obligation," he asked. "We're family." The judge raised an eyebrow. "I'm not married either. Should I pay for my clerk's rent or my bailiff's children?" Rachel blinked, said nothing. The judge turned back to my parents. "Did you financially support Katherine after she became an adult?" "We were helping Rachel," Dad repeated. "So you prioritized one daughter over another." He said it plainly. No accusation, just fact. They didn't answer. For the next hour, he asked hard questions. Not cruel, but unflinching. Why did they assume I would pay? Why purchase a house they knew Rachel couldn't afford? Why tie help to guilt and guilt to debt? They gave the kind of answers that collapse under their own weight. When we stepped outside, Grandma hugged me first. "You were steady," she said. "That's more than I can say for anyone else in that room." I wasn't sure if I'd won. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one on trial. The verdict came 1 week later. The courtroom felt smaller the second time. Maybe because I was finally breathing in it. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Sanders, the financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He glanced down at his notes, then back up. In fact, the evidence suggests Ms. Katherine Sanders has already provided significant financial support to both you and her sister. Then quietly, but not softly, "Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing." Dismissed. Just like that. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just stood there while Jennifer smiled and Grandma squeezed my arm and Grandpa whispered, "You're free." I thought it was over. It wasn't. A week later, I got a call from Grandma. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said, voice tired. "She asked us to release her inheritance early. For what I asked, though, I already knew. To pay off Rachel's mortgage," she said. I sat down. "What did you say I told her? We haven't decided who gets what. That the will is ours to manage." "Did she get angry?" "No," Grandma said. "She cried. She begged us not to disinherit her." I didn't know what hurt more, that she asked, or that she cried over money, not me. Months passed. Quiet ones. I closed on a small house, nothing big, but mine. I painted the kitchen yellow, planted tomatoes, adopted a gray cat that slept beside my laptop every night. Rachel rented out her house, moved back in with our parents. Mom babysat while Rachel worked. Somehow they made it work. I didn't call. I didn't write. Then, almost a year after the trial, an email landed in my inbox. No subject line. Just this, "We heard you bought a house. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Rachel and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it twice. I didn't get angry. I just replied, "I will not be hosting Rachel or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again." Then I hit send, blocked the email, and made tea. These days, my house smells like fresh basil and coffee. The cat, marble gray and solemn, sits on the windowsill most mornings watching birds he'll never chase. I painted the kitchen yellow like I always said I would, and the tomatoes out back are finally coming in. It's quiet here. No voices raised, no questions I don't want to answer. Grandma and Grandpa visit often. They bring pie or old newspaper clippings they think I'll like. Grandpa helps with the gutters. Grandma still reminds me to lock my windows at night, even though I've got a security system. They don't talk about my parents unless I ask, and I rarely do. One Sunday, as we sat on the porch swing, Grandma said, "Your mother's still talking about you, still telling people you abandoned Rachel." I didn't answer. "Your Aunt Pat told her to stop bringing it up at family gatherings. Said no one wants to hear it anymore." That part made me smile. I'm not naive. I know they still think I failed some unspoken test of loyalty, that I should have stepped up even if it meant laying down everything I'd built. But I also know this, I sleep better now. Rachel, from what I hear, is still living at home, renting out the house to cover the mortgage. The boys are growing fast. I haven't seen them in over a year. Sometimes I wonder what they've been told. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever reach out. But I don't wait for it. I'm dating someone, Mark, kind, quiet, with a laugh that feels like space being made. He doesn't ask about my family. Not yet. And I don't offer. Some ties don't need explaining. Some ties don't need mending. Every once in a while I feel that ache of what could have been. If they'd ever seen me as more than spare parts. If love hadn't come with fine print. But I don't regret saying no. Not anymore. Because peace, I've learned, isn't given. It's claimed.